Lisle doing a joint Q&A, which if you saw the last two is, in my opinion, the highlight of the conference. But before we bring them up, I have a little tribute to them to celebrate a friendship. Dr. Lisle and Dr. Goldhamer met in the 4th grade, and they've been best friends since, which means that they've actually had a 50-year friendship. So why are we celebrating a 40-year friendship? The last 10 years, not so good. You know, they say that opposites attract, and they really can't be two more different people. But I heard from their mothers that even the way that they were dressed as infants sort of dictated what their future personalities were going to be. For years, they were inseparable, often even wearing the same clothing. They both became doctors, and when they became doctors, in addition to all the esteem that came with it, so did lots of facial hair. Dr. Lisle became a psychologist and was trained by one of the finest. If you can't see that in the back, it's a dog that's the therapist saying, "My therapy is quite simple. I wag my tail and lick your face until you feel good about yourself again." Dr. Goldhamer became a chiropractor. It says, "A low-carb diet is bad for you. One of my patients slipped on some bacon grease and broke her toe." Okay. After they became doctors, they were able to become veritable chick magnets and hang out with some of the world's most beautiful women. That's last year at the conference. Now, is it just me, or does it look like Dr. Goldhamer is packing heat in that photo? Many of you know them for their collaboration on the wonderful book, The Pleasure Trap. But what you may not know is that Dr. Goldhamer actually wrote a solo book first. That's a real book. That's a bra hanging out. It's called The Pleasure Trip. It is a pleasure trap, but so Dr. Goldhamer wrote that one. Now, on Friday night, I asked them both if I could take them to dinner, but they both declined. Dr. Lisle said the reason was because he wanted to stay in his room and work on his slides and work on the pictures that he drew for his slides. Dr. Goldhamer said it was because he had several appointments. First, he had a massage. Then he decided to get a facial. And because we all know the importance of sleep to a healthy lifestyle, he went to bed early. I asked Dr. Lisle and Dr. Goldhamer, instead of doing a Q&A, if we could just do a competition like a game show to see which one was actually smarter. Here's what Dr. Lisle said. But Dr. Goldhamer said this. Says, "I'm a chiropractor. To save time, let's just assume I'm never wrong." All right. So to celebrate their 40-year friendship, I asked them both if they had something they wanted to offer the other. And Dr. Lisle actually Dr. Goldhamer actually, Dr. Lisle offered a gift to Dr. Goldhamer, which I have on stage, but here's what Dr. Goldhamer offered. He said, "We'll be friends till we're old and senile. Then we'll be new friends." Ladies and gentlemen, in my opinion, the two most wonderful people on the planet, Dr. Ellen Goldhamer and Dr. Doug Lisle. You may not know this, but I'm Dr. Goldhamer's stylist. When I met him, he was wearing pastel pink and peach shirts from Costco. I'm the one that got him to dress in black, but I figured you need one more accessory. And to thank you for being on this panel, we do have a pair of socks that say Alan and a pair of socks that say Douglas. If you want, you can switch them up and each wear each other's socks like you used to. Now, when we did say that Dr. Lisle did have a present for you to celebrate all the years of friendship, and this present does indicate how very much Dr. Goldhamer means to Dr. Lisle. So why don't you open it in front of the group? It's not a ticking bomb, I promise.
I can't see with this.
Oh, take the glasses off then. Yeah, this was just a little prop. Now, if I agree, I have the bobblehead. And if I'm really excited, I'm gonna ring the bell.
I went to a lot of trouble.
This is how much you mean to him. What he's given Dr. Goldhamer now is just, it's extraordinary to me. He doesn't get very many presents, which is why he's having such a hard time opening this one.
Oh, just what I wanted. That's my potato.
There we go. All right. Now, Dr. Lisle, you talk a lot on your podcast about how men are visual and that attractiveness is important. And I know that a lot of men like lingerie, but it doesn't turn Alan on. But what does turn him on is this. Oh, sorry. But what really turns him on is this one. Yeah. All right. So speaking of sex, we better get this question out of the way. Oh, by the way, they have 3 cards. Some of them are not agree, disagree. Some of these are just straight up questions. One of the ladies had a question for Dr. Barnard in his hormone haywire talk and asked if it's okay to take like bioidentical hormones, estrase, and he never got to it. So is that okay? And if not, what do you 2 recommend for vaginal dryness and pain during intercourse? Morpheus, is the clock that's starting? You don't have to answer it.
I wouldn't have any idea.
What about you?
Like all problems, you have to actually try to figure out what the cause of the difficulties are. If there's hormonal imbalances that are going on in an individual, then ideally you want to try to correct the underlying hormonal balance, living with diet, sleep, exercise. Sometimes there are problems that you can't correct with diet, sleep, and exercise, so you have to resort to exogenous agents. In the case of vaginal dryness, there's lubricants that can be used short of hormonal. They're more of a mechanical issue, and there are also, if necessary, you can resort to there are nutritional medicine aspects that can help balance hormonal, and in some cases, drugs.
Okay. Well, because I'm an open book, and I was prescribed estrase by one of your finest medical doctors, Dr. Peter Latana. So it's nothing to be ashamed about, Or you could just do what I do as a Jewish woman and just say no. You know how to get a Jewish woman to stop having sex, right? Marry her. All right. So now, basically, I love. He's so sweet. You know that on the inside you're laughing. You like me though, right? I mean, deep down inside.
Very deep.
All right, so what I've decided to do is instead of asking straight up questions, I watched every single YouTube video that Dr. Goldhamer had, and I noticed there were certain phrases he says all over and over. Like, for example, good health is the result of healthy living. I'm going to say a hammerism, a phrase that Dr. Goldhamer says over and over, and I'm going to let Dr. Lisle go first, and he can either have his sign, would you hold it up, you guys, agree, or he could hold up disagree, or one in between. If something that Dr. Goldhamer has said that is so egregious, Dr. Lisle, I'm going to give you a special tool where you can just go. And I'm going to give you one too in case you don't agree with something that Dr. Lisle says.
Test it out. Got it.
Okay, make sure your pen is working. All right. So for example, I'm pretty sure you can go to osteopathic school. All right, so here we go. So, but first I want to ask just a fun question. If they made a movie out of the pleasure trap, who would you want to play you, and who do you think should play the other guy? Either one of you can go first.
Well, I think that the best person to play Dr. Lisle would be Marilyn Streep.
I think your name is Meryl, but okay. And who should play Dr. Goldhamer?
Sean Connery.
Aww. Aww. That's sweet, that's sweet. All right. I'm pretty sure that Dr. Lisle would agree that good health is a result of healthful living. So I'll go on to some more interesting things that Dr. Goldhamer says over and over again. Dr. Lisle, let's see. When a woman loses 50 pounds, all her coworkers think she is a mate poaching whore. Agree or disagree? Agree. Would you like to say why you agree?
I'm just having fun.
Okay.
Certainly, one of the more interesting things that you see is that when people make major transformations, it changes all kinds of dynamics in their lives. And one thing that is a surprise is that they've been envisioning that so many things would be so much better because they've had a lot of unhappiness that has come from being trapped in a body that they're not proud of and getting a lot of negative steam signals from others for a long time. And so when that starts to change, their imagination is that this is going to finally be a place where they're going to be happy consistently at a high level. And when they start to get those positive signals, it can be exhilarating. In other words, they can smell the pay dirt of the promised land. But what they don't see coming is that there can be a lot of disruption in the dynamics of a number of their relationships, and so it isn't all positive, but there can be quite a bit of negative and actually quite a bit of pretty serious negative that comes along with it. That will sometimes cause people to retreat. In other words, it's not that they then self-sabotage, it's that their motivation to continue gets disrupted as things get complicated, and probably the more agreeable and pleasant they are, the more difficult time that they can have with some of the negative feedback that they get. So this is Alan has a way with words, and he's got a point there. That dynamic can actually lead to quite a bit of resentment and discomfort among even the closest of friends at times. So yeah, it's a problem. It's a bigger journey. One last thing I would say about this is that I've had quite a few people that have been very successful, either following AJ or us, over the years. And one thing that will happen is that these people will sometimes get approached and encouraged to do their story, to write a book, to have a TV show, to have this or that, a bunch of notoriety. And my uniform answer is, don't do it. Don't do it. Don't make a show out of this. This is your own private, difficult, obstacle-filled journey. And if it's such a great idea to write a book or have a TV show or anything else about this, it'll be a good idea 3 or 4 or 5 years from now, after this has become a new you and you've fully integrated everything that it takes to have an accomplishment of this magnitude.
That's terrific advice. I see so many people that write their book after losing extraordinary amounts of weight only to put it back on. So thank you. Would you, you agree? The question was when a woman loses 50 pounds, she becomes a mate poaching whore. You don't want to say anything more about that then? No. Okay, all right. All right, so the next hammerism that I hear him say often is instead of eating peanut butter, rub it all over your belly, hips, and thighs because that's where it's going to end up anywhere. Anyway, you can go first if you like.
Well, actually, I made that comment around chocolate.
Okay, excuse me.
So I said that if you want to use chocolate, melt it down and then rub it on your belly, hips, and wash it off so you don't have to carry it around all week. And so, that's a better way to take it than to eat it.
Right. So, but the question, we've had questions about peanut butter. Actually, Charles, you told me to ask him a question about peanut butter. So how do you feel about peanut butter?
Peanut butter is a problem because, first of all, peanuts are not nuts, they're legumes. And the way peanuts are commercially processed and stored, they tend to have a high concentration of aflatoxin, which is a mold that causes liver cancer, and it's particularly nasty. Peanuts are very high in saturated fat, and they're almost always served roasted, so you're applying a high degree of heat to a high-fat food, which results in products that are not desirable. Raw peanuts kind of taste like crap, so people aren't usually going to want to eat them. And so it's not what I would consider a health-promoting food. So you've got a high saturated fat, contaminated product that's not desirable. So I'd say that it would be one of those foods we'd want to avoid.
Dr. Lisle, agree or disagree?
No, I agree. Absolutely.
Wonderful. That's terrific. All righty. If your salad isn't big enough to feed a family of 8, you're not eating enough. Dr. Lisle, agree or disagree? Oh, we have a difference of opinion. You're going to have to do a rebuttal on this one, okay? But let him go first.
He's having fun. He's just making a point. That's all.
Okay.
No, I'm not just making a point. I'm saying that if your friends walk in the room and they see your salad, the most common reaction of people that are not familiar with this will go, "Oh my gosh, you're not going to try to eat all that, are you?" And the fact is, if they don't react that way, it's a sign you don't have a big enough bowl. So you want to have a big bowl. There should be shock and awe, because most people, they think salad is the decoration on the edge of the plate. It's not even something they eat. And so I think that people need to be prepared for the fact that if they actually have enough food, they may get some social feedback that's negative, because people were thinking that, oh, that's too much food, how can you eat that much? But that's how much food you have to eat if you're going to be successful at losing and maintaining weight.
Oh, good. I'll tell another story. Our outpatient office used to be across from a Fresh Choice, and Alan and I would go there every day for lunch. And when we'd have interns coming to do their stint at TrueNorth Health Center, we'd take them to lunch just to see, just to talk to them and say hello, etc. And we'd always be curious about what would happen in the salad line. And we could see that if they had a small salad, we knew that they had a lot to learn, that they weren't nearly where they thought they were. And a few times when we had interns that had big old salads, we knew that they were already way on board. So it's a nice little barometer. So in that instance, we certainly agree on this general direction.
And it was just a coincidence that after we'd been in practice there a while and started getting our patients eating at that place, this buffet salad bar, that they went bankrupt.
Terrific. If you drink alcohol, eat highly refined carbohydrates like sugar, oil, flour, or consume greasy, slimy, dead, decaying animal flesh, you are going to get fat or sick or both. Nice. Either one can comment on this wonderful way he turns the phrases.
Alcohol particularly. I mean, think about what happens to people that drink alcohol. Men get those really attractive beer bellies, because alcohol's got 7 calories per gram. It's like liquid fat. I mean, it's just, you'd be almost impossible not to gain weight if you're drinking significant amounts of alcohol. Men get that plumber's crack. Yeah. Chicks do. And in fact, that's why they make the jeans right up as much as 2 inches higher, because the women were going crazy. So when you're drinking alcohol, you're really just saying, how fat do I want to be? And that includes all forms of alcohol, not just beer, but also wine and hard liquor as well. So, I don't think there should be any question that there's a correlation between drinking alcohol and gaining weight. I think it's pretty well established.
Do you have anything to offer, Dr. Lisle?
We certainly differ in, where Alan and I differ is not in categories, but we differ on continua. In other words, he wanted there to be one place that had a singular message, that if you were very sick, that you could come to that place and everything that would be possible to aid your body to heal would be being done. There would be no half measures, there'd be no 90% measures, there'd be no 95% measures. That if the difference between success and failure when you get backed into a corner and you don't have a lot of function left might be the difference between being 100% and being 99. And so whenever I hear of anyone that has a very significant health challenge, he and I don't have a single disagreement. We are absolutely on the same page. Where we differ is in a sort of philosophy of where you stand if that isn't true. And when that isn't true, if you're young and healthy and spry and you do a very good job and everything looks good, and you are going to indulge once in a while on this, that, or the other. Don't have to be young and healthy and spry. You can be older and healthy and spry. But the point is that it's an estimation of how much resilience that you have and what things that you can do, and you could probably be fine. That your body can repair whatever it is that's going to happen. I'm not as doctrinaire as he is, but that's because he's coming from a singular philosophy that says there's one way to do it that's perfect, and there isn't a second way. There is objectively, and this is actually philosophically correct. There is one objectively correct view of how to live. Okay, now what that objective view is can be subject to debate and scientific investigation and an awful lot of piecemeal, very fine-grained problems. But I don't think there's any doubt that the direction that we have at TrueNorth is very close to what that optimum is. And so I have no objection to the hard line. The only issue is the individual choices about how close you aim there. That's a matter of personal preference and a matter of personal, risk factors. That's all.
Okay, so here's the thing, though. The reason we called the facility TrueNorth is there's a lot of different directions, to move in the general direction, but we believe there is a right way. We don't necessarily say we know all the answers about exactly what that way is. That's why we're doing research. We're a primary research facility. But there is a way. We're trying to discover that. And nobody's going to come back and say, well, let's put it this way. Our patients, more so than other patients, have to be concerned about the long term because they're likely to live to the long term. And so you don't want to have a person that lives a long time because they lived healthily and get to the point where they end up having debility that was preventable because they were too indulgent in behavior and lifestyle changes that they had an option on. So my attitude is I'm not likely to have negative feedback from people that were too strict and too healthy and lived too long and lived too well. But you might get people in hindsight thinking, they wish they had done a little bit better job of taking care of things they could have taken care of. So I'd always try to err on the side of doing the right thing, and particularly for patients that are going to live a long, long time. For people that are going to die prematurely from heart disease and cancer and stroke and all that other stuff, maybe they don't have to worry as much about it. But in our patient populations, we do have a requirement. When people come to the TrueNorth Health Center, we only ask them for one thing, and that's to do their very best to maintain a healthy diet and lifestyle for 50 years. And then once we get our 50-year follow-up, then they're free to do whatever they want. They can go do that second half-ass measures, whatever. I don't care after that because we've got our outcome data well established.
You're just such a humanitarian, Dr. Goldhamer,
Warm. It's warm. It's warm.
Yep. So, but I like what you said about certain behaviors being optional, because this next question is one thing I've heard Dr. Goldhamer say, which is, coffee is a highly addictive central nervous stimulant. It is one of the most addictive drugs on the planet and most difficult to withdraw from, and it's just nasty and shouldn't be used.
I would agree with this. Now, I agree with this more now than I would have a couple months ago. I certainly knew that he had a point, as he always does, and I know that he's anchoring down the far end of extreme, which he always does, and that's all admirable and it's all plenty accurate. However, certainly this is one of these deals where you look out at the population and you see hundreds of millions and billions of people using coffee, and they're not dropping dead at 42 years old or 36 years old from any evidence of any caffeine toxicity. So that's not happening. Or is it? The truth is that we now know that sleep deprivation is a major problem, not only with heart disease, not only with cancer, but we've long known and now appreciate more that sleep disruption is an enormous factor in accidents. So people that are sleep deprived, and that means people that use coffee and are sleeping 5-6 hours a day, these kinds of people are 10, 12 times more likely to die in an accident. This is a big deal. They are dropping dead at 36 as an indirect result of having a brain that's fatigued. So I've learned a great deal now more about sleep and sleep disruption, and also, in addition, something that he just spoke about, which is the long-term effects that we need to worry about. I'm now watching my mother be debilitated behind Alzheimer's. And I've been watching this for a long time. And, you know, she's still her, she's still got a lot of her personality, and I just love her to death, and she's still with us. And so she still knows who I am and who my sister is and who Alan is. She always asks how he's doing. And I say, the outdoor boy is what my mom always called Alan. He really wasn't welcome in the house. It's just too noisy. And so, but now I'm watching her fade, and many of you have people like this. So she's 85 and she's fading, and I keep watching it year by year. I watch this go. And one of the things that she always liked to do is drink coffee. And so probably 10 years ago, behind Alan's pushing me, I got her so that she just drank decaf, and which was an improvement. But that's where it stopped. And so it's been decaf, 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 and now I've learned that decaf is actually, even decaf is having a substantial effect on sleep disruption, and therefore the brain health and reintegration of memory and memory function. And also it appears that Alzheimer's is very much related to sleep disruption and sleep deprivation. So my mom also would like to have a glass of wine now and then, which I thought not too much of. And so now I'm actually watching, and a quite healthy person who's done a pretty good job on her diet and did a pretty good job on exercise for a long time. Now I'm finally watching the one thing that she put the most stress on, which was her brain. Okay, so her heart didn't put a lot of stress there, didn't put a lot of stress on her kidney and her livers, ate a pretty healthy diet. But what was there was three things that disrupted her sleep: coffee, wine, and the light bulb, staying up as a night owl reading romance novels. Those three things, which I've subsequently now shut them all down, are important and is contributed to this disability.
You know, this is particularly going to be an important issue because if you eat a healthy diet and you exercise, you're not as likely to have a heart attack or a stroke, so you're going to live longer. You live long enough to reach some of these other problems that a lot of people don't see because they drop dead of cardiovascular disease early on, and so they don't live long enough to be able to get these more difficult aging problems. And so for you, it becomes even more important to fine-tune the diet and lifestyle factors because you're doing good enough to avoid a lot of the early phase diseases. We also want to avoid the later phase diseases. You want to live, you know, right to the end, to where you go to sleep one night and you don't wake up. You don't want to spend years in debility. And the way you prevent the debility is prevent the things that cause the debility. And that's where sometimes what seems like extreme or fanatical recommendations actually make a lot of sense, because you're really trying to ensure that the last couple decades of life can be the best years of your life rather than the worst.
I want to just follow up. One of the things that we got to when we wrote The Pleasure Trap was a culmination of the thinking that happens late in the book, and I think it's the last couple of chapters, and where we write that the prescriptions that we have sound like this: whole natural food diet, exercise, sleeping to satiety, and periodic fasting. Now, those prescriptions really, quite frankly, either singularly or as a group, are considered radical. So almost any doctor in the world would consider our dietary recommendations radical. The notion of sleeping to satiety and making that and getting rid of all coffee and alcohol and any drugs that would be disruptive to the sleep cycle, that would be considered radical, okay? Exercise wouldn't be considered radical, but fasting would be considered radical. But literally those 4 prescriptions are how all of your ancient ancestors, every single one of them, did them all. They were doing those perfectly. So that's literally in your biological design, that's the optimal set of circumstances to maintain optimum health for you. And so these are not actually radical. What they are is they are exactly the first step that we look to. TrueNorth is the place that Alan created to essentially make that restoration of the healthy, natural, optimizing our health capacities to make that possible. And of course, we see, quote, miracles all the time. We have file drawers full of what would be considered medical miracles. And to us, it's literally a matter of routine. We're not even excited about it anymore. We're just interested in documenting it so that everybody in the world can learn this.
Terrific. Dr. Lisle, you mentioned your mother enjoys romance novels. By any chance, did she read Dr. Goldhamer's first book, The Pleasure Trip? If not, I have a copy for her. So one of the things Dr. Goldhamer often says is, it is exceedingly difficult to overeat on a no added salt diet.
Well, it's exceedingly difficult to overeat on a diet that avoids salt, oil, sugar, and is abundant in fresh fruits and vegetables. In other words, if you eat large amounts of salad, like we talked about, where your friends become shock and awe, and then you have some steamed vegetables, by the time you get around to the more concentrated foods, there's only so much physical space in your feeding chamber, and as a consequence, the tendency to overeat is significantly reduced. And so that's actually what I said.
But the reason I took by the way, these quotes were direct from you, but wait, please let me finish. The reason I said salt is because we have a lot of people already following the oil-free diet and the sugar-free diet. You're the only one in the plant-based world that is a stickler on salt.
Right, I just didn't want to be misrepresented to say that was the only verb. You got to do everything, salt included. Salt is responsible for significant passive overeating.
Thank you.
In other words, if you sit down and you just eat your fill on any given day, say rice or vegetables or whatever it is, you'll eat a certain amount and you'll feel full. If you, on a different day, the circumstances being the same, take that same rice and salt it up, you'll find you tend to eat more. And people say, of course, because it tastes better. But part of tasting better is stimulating that dopamine cascade in your brain that leads to you consuming more. So one of the things that salt does is and it's, I think, clearly been demonstrated to help contribute to passive overeating. And so we want to avoid that.
Right, and what I've read is not only just overeating, but generally overeating of more fat. Would you agree, Dr. Lisle, that salt encourages overeating?
Well, certainly anything that you do that alters the diet away from the diet of our natural history is going to encourage overeating. That doesn't mean that everyone will overeat. So there's going to be people that can put salt on their food and they're not going to overeat. There's going to be people that can put, fat in their food and then they're not going to overeat. So the individual difference variables here are considerable. But anybody that's struggling with overeating and has weight that they'd like to lose, then they have to look at exactly the things that are disrupting the ability of their mind to judge what it is that they should be doing. And sodium is one of those things, and so is fat, so is the grinding of food, so is sugar, so is the grinding of food, the softening of food, the puffing of food. So I'll have people that are eating slews of popcorn every night, and they're thinking this is good food, which biochemically is perfectly fine. The problem is that it's dried and puffed so that it's very, very soft and easy to digest. It has very high calorie density because the natural water that would be in a corn that you would eat in corn on the cob is now gone. So the calorie density is, I think, about 1,400 calories a pound or so. So it's twice the caloric density of meat, more or less. You never think about that. So it isn't that you can't eat some high calorie dense foods. Our ancestors did. Nuts and seeds all the way up to 2,500 calories a pound. It's not like we can't periodically visit foods that have higher calorie density, but if you have a weight problem we've got to look at all of the factors that are responsible for that overconsumption, and certainly salt is going to be one of those things.
Thank you. Women are energy-conserving, estrogen-producing fat storage machines.
I think I just... What? How did I know that you were going to just put me into a corner like this one day? That's how... There's some truth in it. That's how we'll skate out of that.
Women are designed to have babies, and men don't have babies. And it's a good thing. As it turns out, you need to have 2.1 births per couple in order to sustain a population. And so if males had babies, our species would have been extinct within approximately 20 generations. And the reason is because there never, ever, ever would have been even one example of a second birth. Not even once. And in fact, there wouldn't have been very many first births. Maybe 20 a year on the planet. And it would be completely different than it is now, because women, you'll have reports of women having babies, they squat down in the field, deliver their baby, and then 20 minutes later they're back working. Men, lifetime retirement. It would be like on the TV, tell us about the time you had the baby. Let me tell you. And so, fortunately, women have babies, that because they have the babies, they have a propensity to store higher degrees of fat to survive that period of biological vulnerability. So they have estrogen. Estrogen is a fat storage hormone. And so, if you are a woman, you are essentially, biologically speaking, an energy-conserving fat storage device.
So basically, ladies, we're in a no-win situation, because either we're a fat storage machine, or if you lose the weight, we're a bait poaching horse, so we can't win either way. All right.
He said it.
Exactly. If you aren't sure if you should eat or drink a particular food or drink.
I got a short one.
Oh, sure.
Okay, yeah, sorry. We had I'm not always the most politically correct person, but we had a patient in our office that was one of the other doctor's patients. And the other doctors that work at TrueNorth Health Center are generally, politically correct, socially appropriate. So I'm seeing this other doctor's patient, and it's an outpatient. Wasn't staying at the center, she just came to the outpatient clinic. And I'm trying to be, it's not my patient, so I'm trying to be, respectful and appropriate. But the woman is, quite a bit overweight, and I get through the treatment. She says, "Look, I come to you people, and I get relief from my back pain, but every month or so it starts to come back. Why?" And I said, "Well, it's because you're way too fat." And she said, "Well, I never," and got very upset. Now I'm thinking, this is not a surprise to her, certainly. I mean, most women are aware if they're like 5 ounces overweight. This woman's at least 50 pounds overweight. And she's like, just really upset. So I think, okay, well, I'll try to make things right. So I got her an article called, "Do You Want to Be Fat for Life?" And I gave her the article, she grabbed it from me and left it. Of course, I don't see her again, till 3 months later. She's in the office, not to see me, but to see the doctor that, she'd originally come to see. And she saw me, and she said, "Oh, you, come with me." She took me to my office. It was just like we were back in high school again, where they had a special chair for me. I walked into the office, and she said, "You're the rudest, most arrogant doctor I've ever had to deal with." And then she did this, she went, "But look." So it turns out she read the article, she went home, and in the 3 months that it had been, she lost 25 pounds. And she said, "I don't want to encourage you, but my back has never felt better." So then the funny part of the story is, though, she referred her best friend to me. And her best friend was also quite a bit overweight. The very first thing the friend said was, "Well, I suppose you're going to tell me I'm too fat. I said, I would never do something like that. So I may explain you have a bit of excess adiposity. And she says, what does that mean? I said, it means you're too fat.
I'm just curious what kind of gifts you give your wife, Jennifer. That's all that's going through my head. Carob is a gateway drug to the use of chocolate. Dr. Lisle, agree or disagree?
Oh, I don't know what I can do. I don't think. Let me see. I'm gonna go in the middle.
I don't. That's sort of a silly comment, but it's fun. The truth is that I'm not so sure that there's anything better about carob than there is about chocolate, because anything that we're eating there is, we're not eating some straight natural carob off of a carob bush. We're eating a processed product that's, you know, it's just as disruptive as chocolate, I'm sure. So that's why I wouldn't. That's just, he's got away with words. But no, all of it, you know, we have an eye for what our very safe, healthy food is, which is in the produce aisle. And if it's not in the produce aisle, you better be thinking carefully about what you're doing and why.
You know, I think that people get caught up in this idea that if something's less bad, that makes it good. If something's less bad than something else doesn't make it good. It just makes it somewhat less bad. And the dangerous thing about something like carob, it's not that it's quite as bad as chocolate, because it doesn't have as much caffeine or other things, but people are under the illusion that because it's not as bad as chocolate, not only can they eat it, but they can eat it with abandon, and that somehow they're doing themselves a favor. It's just a less bad highly processed product than some other even worse processed product, and you should just get rid of all of them.
Well, that was actually the next thing. Just because something is less bad doesn't mean it's good, is a frequent saying of Dr. Goldhamer's. Dr. Lisle, would you agree with that?
Certainly.
Great, thank you. If you aren't sure if you should eat or drink a particular food or drink, just ask yourself, do I really want this or do I really need this? And if the answer is yes, you can't have it.
Well, it's just, that's one of his, he's got about 50 of these, and they're just things of beauty. And I could say, I would say this, not about this, but just about Alan and his career. One of the most amazing things I ever saw was I was still in grad school, and he was already practicing. And he invited me to sit in on him seeing outpatients. And after about 2 or 3 of these outpatients, I just thought he was showing off, because every single one of them, he put out tremendous energy. These are all people coming in with back problems, and every single one of them was getting an enormously challenging and humorous dialogue for 40 minutes about how to change their lives. It was like 3 in a row. And he was sweating. In other words, he works very hard physically, and he does, super comprehensive. And I thought, okay, I've seen your act. It'd be good for you. Went on all day. I watched it. This was no act. This guy was going, this was 180 miles an hour all day long, every patient, never backed off of anybody. So and his frustration for me, he says, you're the psychologist, you better help me figure out who it is that's worth it, because I'm putting out a lot of energy, and he could feel that what it felt like to put out that energy with that message and have them not succeed. But it's not like he would give them one shot at it. These people would get 20, 30, 50 shots a year if they were coming in every week. And he'd keep at it, and he'd keep at it. So I have just enormous admiration for the energy, and I give him a lot of latitude because he's so bossy and so doctrinaire, and it's just so the hard line. But you know what? Somebody's got to be the sheriff, and this is the sheriff.
Yeah, thank you. We live in a world designed to make us fat, sick, and miserable. Dr. Lisle, agree or disagree?
I totally agree. Alan has a way with words, as you can tell, and he not only titled our book, but then I was wrestling for weeks with the subtitle. And he finally got tired. Got tired of me wrestling with the subtitle. And he sat down in about 20 minutes. He maneuvered the words around. He was always way better at Scrabble than me. He could always out-talk me. And he came up with Mastering the Hidden Force That Undermines Health and Happiness. And I thought, God, he did it again. I can't believe he did it again. And he did it. And that is exactly what this is about. The pleasure trap is now worldwide. It's a ubiquitous problem that human beings have created. They have transformed their own ability to put together new combinations of chemicals and stimulation that artificially stimulate the dopamine and pleasure pathways. And they put themselves in a position where their instincts are now working against them. And as a psychologist, I saw a different component to this. I mean, Alan saw it, but he wasn't as close to it as I was. He saw the undermining of health, and he saw how much frustration and pain that people would live behind this, and no matter how hard he would push, so many people would still be left behind. So we knew that the force was big. But the second thing that he saw less of, but because as a psychologist, I'm sitting and I'm talking to people about their lack of confidence and their embarrassment about who it is that they are, and the struggle in their relationships, and their feeling lost about their attractiveness, and the prejudice that comes against them for having bodies that don't look normal and healthy. And I looked at this, and the more we talked about it over the years, it's like, wow, this is the biggest problem in the world. I mean, there's big problems in the world. There's political problems in the world, environmental problems in the world, there's poverty, there's all kinds of problems in the world. But the biggest problem in the world, is the pleasure trap. It's reaching into more lives every day, and the ones that it's already reached, it is a tenacious hook inside of these nervous systems. It's very difficult to extract yourself from it. And we all shrug our shoulders because it's so normal, and the doctors are going to say, well, no, you're doing okay, you're doing okay. You're 40 pounds overweight, and you're on metformin, and they're looking at cutting your feet off, and you may be blind because your sister's already blind, and people in your family already died in their 60s from various, and this is normal, and this is how it's going to go? No, it's not normal. And so this is, he's absolutely right. This problem is the biggest thing that is in your world, and it's in the world. And so that's why we've dedicated our lives to try to help some of us that are alert enough and smart enough and lucky enough and have the temperament and determination to try to extract yourself from the hidden force that undermines your health and your happiness.
Yeah. So after I had done the heavy lifting, which was coming up with the title and the subtitle, I wanted to protect Dr. Lisle's esteem. And so I let him make a contribution by actually writing the book. It seemed fair.
I love the way you're always thinking of others. A lot of people would say their three favorite words they would ever hear is "I love you," but with Dr. Goldhamer, it's "You are right." Okay, moving on. When people ask you, I love when I make you laugh. This is Dr. Goldhamer laughing. The thing is, it's so hard to tell. All right. When people ask you, meaning him or the doctor, how much of a certain food they can eat, like cheese, oil, refined carbohydrates, or even a rich date nut dessert with or without cocoa powder, you have to ask yourself, how fat and sick do you want to be? Dr. Lisle, do you agree or disagree?
Well, that's one heck of an internal audience. If that's the internal audience that's in you now, that's just how this guy's built. I'm not built that way. So I would disagree, but I agree with the warning. Okay, and the warning is we have to be careful with the pleasure trap. I'm not terrified of the pleasure trap. I'm not intimidated by it. And I don't live perfectly, I live well. I live well enough to make darn sure that I'm nowhere near the pleasure trap. That's what I do. That doesn't mean I do everything perfectly, but I do them well enough that I'm nowhere near the trap. That's the level of respect that I have for it. So if for you, as Alan would say, if for you that one bite is going to be enough to draw you into the trap, then you better look out for that bite. If it turns out that one bite isn't enough to draw you into the trap, then we don't have to live in terror of this thing. But we have to give it the respect, and what I should say, the enormous respect that it deserves. We need to be careful.
Absolutely, because as Dr. Goldhamer said, if you could have controlled it, you would have controlled it, but you can't. It's not you, so don't do it. Anything you'd like to add on that? Thank you. If you want to see a hilarious YouTube, just go to my Chef AJ page. It's called Dr. Goldhamer Parody, where I am him. All right, so I love this one because it makes me feel really good about myself. Dr. Goldhamer often says this: I assess a person's intelligence by how much they agree with me. Dr. Lisle, agree or disagree?
Well, I agree because I know that that's exactly how he assesses it.
Yeah, he's gotten a lot smarter over the years.
Yeah, that's not, sorry. Okay. All right, so I have a few more Goldhamer quotes, but I asked Dr. Lisle and Dr. Goldhamer to give me like 3 things that maybe we could put out to both of them that possibly could be an area of disagreement. So this is not agree or
In
disagree.
other words, where he's still wrong.
So I'm going to go with the ones that Dr. Lisle asked first, which is, what are better pets, cats or dogs? You can go first.
I'm just doing a little calculation here. They're both potentially excellent pets.
Okay.
Oh, brother. I can't believe that.
Which also means they're both potentially not very good pets.
Do you remember when you met me in January of 2011? I had a different service dog named Sparky. We had never met. The first thing you did was looked at my dog and said, I hear you taste like chicken. It was by the fountain. Do you remember that? I'm not making this up.
I have a lovely dog at home. It's a Labradoodle.
Named Chewbacca.
My wife loves him. I also have a cat at home, and my wife loves the cat too. And I love my wife.
That's sweet.
So they both could be good.
Okay. Dr. Lisle, what do you think makes a better pet, a cat or a dog? This was your question, so.
Oh, it's my question.
Yeah, you asked it. So.
Oh, cats make better pets. Doesn't mean a dog can't be a great pet, but I'm actually quite introverted, and so cats fit the introvert very well. So they kind of leave me alone. I kind of leave them alone. We meet once in a while in the middle, and that's kind of how it works. But whenever I'm around dogs, they're so friendly, and it's a joy to interact with dogs, but they overwhelm me, and then pretty soon my introvert self wants to escape, and then that wouldn't be very nice to them. So that's why.
Oh. Well, Bailey sure loved you, Dr. Lisle. Okay, so is the weather better in Santa Rosa or Sacramento?
Well, Santa Rosa is probably the best place in the country to live, and it may not have the very best weather of all places on the planet, but everything put together, it's the best place to live. And the reason why I say this is we did our homework and we picked the place that was the best place to live, which is why we set up TrueNorth Health there.
Okay, this actually has a story to it, a little story to it. Okay, so what you wouldn't know, hold on a second, let me just check. Yeah, his hands are about 6 degrees warmer than my hands, And when we'd be at basketball camps or I'd stay over at his house, one thing that you'll find out if you ever sleep in a room with Dr. Goldhamer, which I've done many times, is that when you wake up in the morning, the windows are all steamed up. It's totally true. He'll just steam them up everywhere. He's like a furnace. All right. So he actually worked inside of in the cooler at New Moon Health Food, and he'd be in there with in there in his t-shirt and shorts, no problem, perfectly comfortable down in there at 45 degrees. So I, meanwhile, I'm someone that just loves the heat. I just love it. I don't hold a lot of heat. I don't generate a lot of heat. I don't have a lot of hot air, and so. So I like it warm. So Sacramento is much warmer, and since I moved out there, I'm a lot more comfortable. So that's the difference.
Terrific. Okay, so this is a deathbed question. So you're on your deathbed. Now, you didn't do anything wrong, lifestyle, you're 120 or whatever, and you're gonna have something to eat. You're on your deathbed. Is the right thing to do to have steamed broccoli or a piece of carrot cake?
Well, if I'm on my deathbed, I think I'm going to do a fast. Because I like to be comfortable.
Wow, you never cease to amaze me. That was your question. So.
Oh, that's my question. Good for me. Well, it's going to be the carrot cake all the way. There's no.
And we'll see if this holds up. But I got involved in this whole field because of this one. We were in 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade playing basketball, and he keeps beating me over and over again. It pissed me off. So I practiced a lot, and I thought if I practice enough, I'll be able to beat him. But he would practice too, so it didn't work. So finally I got desperate. It was true desperation, and I started reading just all kinds of stuff. And one of the things I came across with Herbert Shelton's work on diet, fasting, and I thought, I will adopt this. I will get healthier, and I will crush you. Completely failed. Well, in part because he adopted the same damn diet. But now here's the thing. Every few months he goes out there and gets that vegan carrot cake or some variation. And I'm hoping that over enough decades, he's going to age out slightly faster than I am. So maybe by the time we're in our 80s, I'll finally be able to beat him.
So I have one more question, and don't worry about the clock because you two are the rock stars here and you can take as much time as you need. But what I do want to say is that obviously if you need to go to the restroom, go to the restroom. But what we're going to do is we're going to move on, but we're going to do a few drawings after this session. So if you need to go to the restroom, give somebody else your ticket. Hopefully, not everybody will go, but we've got so many more gifts to give away. So here's the last question. So the Ultimate Weight Loss Program is the same diet. It's your diet. You know that, right? So when he criticizes me, he's criticizing you, but indirectly. So it's an abstinence-based program. You say SOS, I say SOFAS, SOFAS, sugar, oil, flour, alcohol, salt, because otherwise people thought that flour and alcohol was okay. So the question is abstinence necessary? It's about do you tell people to strive for perfection and risk the ego trap, or tell people to have some carrot cake and risk the pleasure trap? And again, you can go back and forth, and for this one, because it's so important, take as much time as you need. Don't worry about the clock.
Okay. Yeah, this is actually great. Glad this question's here. I'm not actually sure where this happened. I'm not sure where I began to figure this out, but we've got notes that go back prior to the publication of the Pleasure Trap, and in fact, in an end note of the Pleasure Trap, I actually use the term ego trap when I do an end note and explain this phenomenon. I don't remember what chapter it was out of, but I wanted to sort of mark it for our own history that I had come up with this concept. It's not a completely unique concept in psychology, but the details and the application of it, they are unique. You heard it yesterday in the slow fast way. If you've heard some of my other lectures, like the Continuum of Evil, and you've heard Success Forces and some other things that I've done, I beat this drum a long time, And I beat the drum because I've known it's a very important issue, that if you put the bar too high for anybody, for anything, you're going to get a countervailing motivation that's going to go against the direction that you want to go. This has been researched by Carol Dweck at Stanford. She calls it mindset. So she has identified the dynamic. I don't believe that anything that I've read of hers, that she doesn't have all the underpinnings that I believe that we've identified about the causal dynamics here, but she has absolutely identified the dynamic, and that's why her experiments always work exactly this way. You praise too much or some way put the bar too high, put the expectations too high, and motivation goes the other direction. Yeah, so Alan's letting me answer this because we actually don't have any disagreement at all. What looks like a disagreement is actually just a different, it's literally like a different camera angle on the problem, but we see it exactly the same. There are two great motivational problems that we see. One of them is the pleasure trap. The pleasure trap is an unnatural phenomenon. So you have to understand that it's a bizarre trap, because this was nothing that human beings or any animal was ever supposed to be able to resist. They're supposed to be following their instincts. Their instincts are the past masters of the survival arts. There is nothing as valuable to a creature as their instinct. And so you are supposed to follow your instincts, and you're supposed to follow those instincts religiously. Now, so you can imagine now, in human beings with their clumsy ingenuity, have now developed abilities to hyperstimulate the pleasure pathways and subvert the instincts, so that now that your instincts are working not just somewhat against you, they're literally 180 degrees against you, commonly. Okay, so that's an amazing motivational problem. However, you can see, if you take a continuum from essentially total indulgence to total abstinence on anything that is supernormal stimuli, that obviously total indulgence requires no self-discipline at all, and it's the most self-destructive thing that you could do. Total abstinence is actually going to be, it's going to be quite easy to do it once the entire system is acclimated to it. It's going to be the least teasing of the motivational problems. But it's going to be the most difficult to actually get there. Now, working against this problem is what I call the ego trap. So notice that these two things are literally what we're going to call opponent processes. They're working literally diametrically against each other. So that if you say to someone, well, here's your problem. The problem is that you're in the pleasure trap, you're actually destroying your body, you're impeding its ability to heal, and it's undermining your health and happiness. And they say, fine, what do I do about it? And they say, this is what you do. Okay? And they say, well, can I do it 80%? You say, yes, you can do it 80%. You'll get quite a bit of the benefit, but not all of the benefit, maybe not all that you need to survive. Okay? But you will get benefit from this. There's no doubt about it. But the problem is, if you do it 80%, you're going to be teasing the pleasure trap in the system. So it's actually going to create ongoing cognitive dissonance over those decisions. Okay? The person says, oh, well, what's the easiest way to do it? Well, the easiest way to do it in principle would be go to 100% where we're not teasing the system. But there's a problem, and that's an extraordinarily high bar. You're actually asking the individual to go against their instincts 100% of the time from the jump and actually get all the way there so that they can eliminate the dissonance. It's literally the hardest thing that you can imagine that you would ever ask an animal to do. Okay? So what instead, if I ask the animal to do it 80%, it's like, okay, well that doesn't sound so overwhelming and that seems possible, right? The only problem is it teases the pleasure trap. So it makes the pleasure trap part of the problem more difficult, but it makes the ego trap part of the problem less difficult. So you can imagine also if you said, okay, what we'll do is we'll take the expectations to 0. Well, at that point, we don't have any ego trap problem at all. We have no motivational dilemma. We just let the person follow their instincts and be utterly and totally pleasure trapped and then destroy themselves. Okay? So there is no perfect system here. And so each individual needs to sort of thread the needle about what fits them best and what it is that they can do. And it would be nice if we could walk people all the way to 100%, but we may never walk you to 100%. Right? Yeah, and this is, as Alan will make a comment about this in a minute. So, but the point is, we don't disagree. We have different fears and concerns. So Alan fears the physical debility and the frustration of physical health when people don't get out of the pleasure trap enough. I fear the psychological self-destructive motive that feels when a person feels overwhelmed, like they can't reach expectations, and they kick over the table and quit. Okay? Both things, both of us see. And so what we try to do is actually thread the needle as best we can to make a person successful enough that they can get on a roll and have enough positive feedback from the success that they have that it makes it easier and more possible as time goes on. Go ahead.
So, I mean, I agree with what you've said. I also know, though, that people that continue to tease the system oftentimes don't succeed, and they screw up my long-term outcome data. So I'm interested in the people that are able to get far enough into the pathway of compliance that they can be successful with it. Now, granted, that cuts out a certain amount of people where the ego trap becomes a dominant factor, but it leaves me the kind of people that we have at TrueNorth Health Center where they get out of the pleasure trap with a fast, they live in an environment where they can do it successfully, and a certain percentage of them have the capacity, motivation, often driven by pain, debility, and fear of death, in order to be able to comply with the situation. Those people make my best long-term outcome data subjects, and so that's who I'm most interested in trying to support.
No question. But I will, the other side of this is a lot of where it is that I live. I had a woman come into my office looking, she was looking for a psychologist because they needed a signature for a gastric bypass surgery. And so she happened to pick my name out of the phone book on an insurance plan, and it's like, well, of all the gin joints in all the world, this is the place she walks into. Okay. So she wanted me to sign this thing. I said no, no. And she's like, well, why not? I said, because this doesn't make sense to me. That what you need to do is you need to make diet and lifestyle changes so that you can lose this weight. And she said, I know, I've already read everything there is about diet. I've tried everything. It's like, yeah, you haven't tried this. All right. So there we sat. She was intrigued enough by my message that she kept coming every week and not doing anything. Just sort of staring at the problem, just staring at it. And I remember she had horrendous hernias, so she just like pushed her hernias back right in when I got used to that. After a while, after 2 or 3 months of that, I was completely, didn't bother me at all, but the first few times it was a little disturbing. I have to tell you. So this went on for months. She was a single mom. She had a daughter. She was much more worried about her daughter's weight than her own. Our daughter already had the genes and the diet around, so she started to gain weight. Her daughter was a fine swimmer and loved to swim, and so she would go to all of her daughter's meets, and she'd sit in the stands, and she was the rejected one because she was 338 pounds, and she was 5'4". And so this and she was an embarrassment to her daughter, and so this was her life, and she kept thinking about that bypass surgery and kept coming to talk to me. And I told her, you can go right next door, there's 4 psychologists in a little office right next door, and be happy to sign your paper. But no, she had enough integrity and enough openness and knew that I was talking straight to her, that she did go over there. And this went on, and finally, I couldn't get her to change anything in her diet. And there's everything about it was rich. It was like basically 100% pleasure trap. And one day, out of frustration, I said, listen, I just want you to get some amount of fiber in that diet. If you could just eat oatmeal in the morning, I don't care what you put in it. Drown it in brown sugar, put honey all over it, maple syrup, Count Chocula, I don't care. Just get some oatmeal in it. So she did. She got oatmeal in her. I don't know what she put on it, but she started, that was her change. So whatever she was eating before was probably bacon and eggs. She changed it. And over the next year, she went from 338 pounds to about 260. So she lost, 75, 80 pounds. And then it stopped. So that change was what was responsible for that amount of the 200 pounds that needed to be lost. So we got 75 of them off of there. And then it hit equilibrium, because her diet was still obviously far too rich. And so I would tell her, look, if I could just get you to do this one more thing. How about if you do, tostada for lunch? No other changes took place. You talk about a frustrated psychologist. It's like, good God, look at how well that worked, and yet we're not going to take it to the next step? No. She was not going to take it to the next step, didn't take it to the next step, and she told me, she said, Dr. Lisle, I'm fine. She says, I no longer qualify for the bypass surgery, so I can't get it. But my daughter's not ashamed of me anymore. I look like all the other women in the stands at the swim meets. I'm fine. I'm happy. It's like, okay, you're happy. If that's good enough for her, that's got to be good enough for me. Okay, and so I try to find the place where they want to go and try to help them to get there. And I know that there's an appropriate place that we call TrueNorth where we go all in. But other people, all people have differing degrees of motivation and different degrees of personal ability to reach those goals. So we try to meet people where they're at.
It's beautiful.
Is there anything either of you would like to say in closing, or just to help inspire people further to possibly consider going more towards the direction of TrueNorth?
And the fact that he's a loving, caring person, I don't hold it against him. He can't help it, it's his personality.
There's nothing like this guy. I met him on a grade school program, playground 50 years ago. And it was always for him about doing the right thing, always. Whether it was playing the games and making sure. I remember a couple times I was going to cheat at something, and he I remember, he would never remember, but I was going to cheat at something, and he looked at me, and I'm like, oh God, I can't do it. It still remains that way to this day, as you all know the famous carrot cake story. But yeah, it's been, I can't believe it. It's 50 years, an incredible ride, and I'm hoping for 50 more.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Doug Lisle, Dr. Ellen Goldhamer. So if you need PP, otherwise we're moving on with some drawings in the next session.
No?